Storytelling has been an indispensable tool of human communication throughout history, and its significance persists in today's technological world. Video games in particular have emerged as a powerful medium for storytelling, with some games rivaling the best movies in their narrative depth and complexity. But back in 1996, long before big-budget games became the norm, Silicon Knights, a gaming studio with a strong interest in academia, dared to venture into console gaming with a game called Blood Omen: Legacy of Kain. It mesmerized players with its intricate dark storyline and thought-provoking narrative, arguably becoming the crown jewel of game storytelling. Legacy of Kain would be subject to a host of controversy after its release, largely a lengthy lawsuit that would see Silicon Knights lose the rights to their Gothic Shakespearean magnum opus. But the resounding success of the first game paved the way for a beloved sequel that was equally as fascinating and captivating as its source material. But the franchise would see itself subject to more monsters throughout the years, with corporate interference, drastic cuts, and time restraints to future installments that even Kain nor Raziel could fix shifting through time. The duo would end up being stranded in 2003, leaving many fans of the series stuck in perpetual hope of their return. This is the rise and fall of Legacy of Kain. In 1993, Dennis Diak's vision for creating groundbreaking games with ambitious storytelling and production values found a like-minded collaborator in Lyle Hall, a producer at Crystal Dynamics. The two met at a gaming conference and quickly discovered their shared passion for epic gaming experiences. Diak pitched several ideas to Hall, including Too Human, a futuristic sci-fi epic, and The Pillars of Nosgoth, a gothic fantasy adventure. Hall was captivated by the awe-inspiring story and characters of The Pillars of Nosgoth, as well as Silicon Knights' commitment to delivering an unparalleled cinematic artistic experience. Ultimately, Crystal Dynamics chose the gothic fantasy adventure over the sci-fi concept, as the higher-ups believed fantasy would have broader appeal among players. And to sweeten the deal, it was decided to include the Soul Reaver, the iconic weapon that was originally intended for Too Human, in the vampire action RPG. Diak and Hall believed that this addition would truly elevate the genre, taking it to new heights of excitement and innovation. As development for the Pillars of Nosgoth commenced, Dennis Diak and the writer Ken McCulloch had two distinct goals in mind. Firstly, they aimed to create a game without an ultimate weapon or armor, challenging players to rely on their wits and reflexes. Secondly, they aspired to craft a mature title that would resonate with adult gamers. To achieve this, they drew inspiration from a darker interpretation of the Legend of Zelda series, infused with influences from Shakespearean literature and the epic fantasy series Wheel of Time. Wheels of Time held a special significance for Diak, who admired its intricate storytelling ability. The subtle and multi-threaded plotlines were what were missing in the fantasy genre, particularly in the gaming industry. It was our goal to create a storyline that was complex and compelling, much like Jordan had done with Wheels of Time, stated Diak in an interview with IGN. Diak further explained that they drew inspiration from Shakespeare's writing techniques to create layers of story that would resonate with different types of gamers. When Shakespeare wrote a play, he targeted his story at several levels, Diak elaborated. For the drunken commoners in the front rows, he would insert dirty jokes to keep them entertained. But for the aristocracy in the balconies, he would write cerebral metaphors. Incorporating this approach into their game, Diak and his team used gore, inspired by the Visceral Necroscope series, a set of scientifically based vampire novels, to add depth to the storytelling. Furthermore, Diak addressed issues of morality, good versus evil, propaganda, and fate in ways that he believed had never been explained in gaming before, catering to players who craved a more thought-provoking experience. Diak shared that one of his most significant inspirations for the world of Nosgoth, especially in its main protagonist Kain, was the movie The Unforgiven, directed by Clint Eastwood. He saw the film as the epitome of depicting moral ambiguity, and he and his team used it as the foundation to create a world where every character had both a good and bad side, and where every action came with a consequence. Diak expressed his conviction that the gaming industry needed to address these complex issues after seeing the movie. He envisioned a game where everyone, including the player's character, would be an enemy in a world where killing innocents was necessary for survival, and where players would be the ultimate pawn. Diak further pondered PSN. How would players react in this situation? How would they feel? If everyone in the world thinks you're evil, are you? Or is evil simply a matter of perspective? After finalizing the themes and inspirations, the creative team embarked on crafting their story. Ken McCulloch and Diak joined forces to co-write the narrative, with a keen focus on the Pillars of Nosgoth as the life force that drives the world. These supernatural structures were safeguarded by 9 human guardians, known as the Circle of Nine, and whenever a member perished, a new guardian would be summoned to take their place. The central conflict of the story revolved around the persecution and extermination of the vampire race. Needing a protagonist to drive the narrative, Diak created Kain, drawing inspiration from the biblical figure of Kain and the character of William Mooney from The Unforgiven. Kain's story followed his descent from nobility to becoming a reborn vampire consumed by bloodlust and revenge. Dyack deliberately veered away from the traditional hero's journey, opting instead to break the mold by featuring an anti-hero, a concept that was not commonly seen in American gaming at the time. During the development process, Dyack recalls facing skepticism from some members of Crystal Dynamics, who deemed the use of Kain as too ambitious. However, Dyack remained steadfast in his vision to challenge conventional gaming tropes and create a unique anti-hero protagonist. Silicon Knights and Dyack in particular were deeply committed to the artistic aspects of their game, which led them to hire professional actors for the voice work. Despite initial doubts from Dyack about whether McCulloch's complex dialogue could be effectively conveyed, actors such as Simon Templeman, Tony Jay, and Paul Lukather proved him wrong, elevating Blood Omen's production value to new heights. This was particularly noteworthy at a time when games like Tomb Raider and Resident Evil were known for their subpar voice work. 2 years into production, Blood Omen made its debut at the very first E3 in 1995. Silicon Knights was insistent on receiving credit for their work, separate from Crystal Dynamics, a decision that would later cause some issues. Silicon Knight argued that if Kain was a book, we would be known as the authors. Fortunately for them, Die Hard Game Fan magazine recognized Silicon Knights as the driving force behind Blood Omen in their preview of E3, naming it the best overall game of the show. Dyack expressed gratitude, saying, "We thank Die Hard for this and many things. They were one of the few magazines to give Silicon Knights any credit. This means a lot to us, and we are eternally grateful for all of those magazines who gave credit where credit was deserved." Upon noticing the long development time and the positive reception from E3, Crystal Dynamics made the decision to significantly increase the size of Silicon Knights' development team, aiming to make the game even better than originally planned. They doubled the size of their own team with notable additions like Amy Hennig and Seth Karras. However, while their intentions were positive, this decision came at great sacrifice for the team. Crystal Dynamics provided additional help to Silicon Knights for the last 8 months of development, but failed to provide them with any proper place to work out of. As a result, the team was forced to use their own off-site accommodations, leading to great personal sacrifice for the developers. Silicon Knights, along with their new team members, put in tireless effort to create Kain's debut title for the PlayStation, even though Crystal Dynamics had initially favored Sega Saturn. Despite being ranked 6th overall at E3 1996, word of mouth was abuzz with praise for the isometric Gothic RPG. As the launch of Kain drew near, Silicon Knights and Dyack were adamant about having a credit screen that explicitly acknowledged them as the creators. This was necessary because of a deal between Activision and Crystal Dynamics, where Activision would handle manufacturing and distribution in North America. Dyack wanted to avoid any confusion amidst the multiple parties involved in bringing Kain to the world. Fortunately, his wishes were granted, and the first ever opening credit scene in the gaming industry was born. In November of 1996, Blood Omen was unleashed to widespread acclaim. The game was lauded for its immersive tone, outstanding voice acting, atmospheric world, and gripping story. However, it was also criticized for its subpar graphics and lengthy load times. Despite these minor setbacks, Kain's journey through the dark and captivating world of Nosgoth was a resounding success, and a sequel was all but inevitable. Following the success of Blood Omen, things took a downturn for Silicon Knights. Despite a sequel being greenlit, Crystal Dynamics and Activision took over development, with Crystal Dynamics assuming the development role. This decision did not sit well with Dyack and Silicon Knights, as they had hoped to create their own sequel. In an effort to thwart Crystal Dynamics' plans, Silicon Knights filed a lawsuit, citing multiple accusations, which included the need to give up the Blood Omen IP to Crystal Dynamics under financial duress, and plagiarism of the premise for the Blood Omen sequel, where Dyack accused Crystal Dynamics for stealing their idea for Kain 2 from a secret Silicon project. The dispute was eventually resolved through a private settlement, with Crystal Dynamics prevailing in the case and obtaining the Legacy of Kain trademark. Amy Hennig, who was brought in by Crystal Dynamics to assist Silicon Knights with Blood Omen, took on the roles of producer, designer, and writer for the sequel when development began in 1997. Contrary to Silicon Knights' claims in their lawsuit, the sequel was not plagiarized. In fact, the original pitch was to transform an unrelated third-person action-adventure game called Shifter, based on biblical mythology, from within Crystal Dynamics into a Legacy of Kain sequel. As stated by Amy Hennig, our original proposal was a concept for a new IP we named Shifter, loosely inspired by the rebellious angels of Paradise Lost. The protagonist was essentially a fallen angel of death, a reaper of souls, hunted by his former brethren, and now driven to expose and destroy the false god they all served. When we were asked to adapt this concept into a sequel to Blood Omen, our challenge was to creatively merge all of these ideas into the Legacy of Kain mythos. Amy and her team remained focused on the key elements that endeared the original game to fans, including its intricate storyline, multi-dimensional characters, superior writing and voice acting, and innovative take on vampire mythology. These elements were carefully preserved in the sequel, as the team upgraded the game from top-down RPG to incorporate gameplay mechanics inspired by Tomb Raider, such as a third-person view and a 3D world with extensive exploration and puzzles. The team's top priority was addressing the notorious loading times that plagued Blood Omen by creating a game with virtually zero loading screens. The conception of the main character and premise for the game was a seamless integration into the rich legacy of Kain lore. Originally envisioned as a fallen angel of death, a vengeful reaper pursued by his former brethren, Amy Hennig and Seth Karras ingeniously crafted Raziel, the Soul Reaver. Raziel's backstory transformed from a fallen angel to a fallen vampire lieutenant, slain by Kain out of jealousy over his newly acquired wings. Raziel was then resurrected by the Elder God, imbued with the power to consume souls and wield the spectral version of the legendary Soul Reaver sword. Driven by his thirst for revenge against his brethren in Kain, Raziel embraced his new role as the Soul Reaver. But development was hindered by several delays and issues with their technological ambitions. The team originally aimed to release the game in October of 1997, but multiple setbacks in the acquisition of Eidos Interactive pushed the release date back until August 1999. Our biggest challenge, hands down, was getting the data streaming working to allow us to have a seamless interconnected world with no load events, Hennig shared with the PlayStation blog. We ultimately got it working by the skin of our teeth, but I wonder if we would have embarked on such an ambitious plan if we'd known how difficult it was going to be. In addition to the technical hurdles of achieving zero loading screens, the team also had to tackle the challenge of storing 2 sets of data for the spectral and material realms simultaneously, in real time. Considering the expansive scope of the game, all within the newly set release date by Eidos Interactive, who wanted the game out in less than 2 years. To meet the deadline set, the team had to make significant cuts to the game's content, which included additional powers for Raziel, a third battle with Kain, and an expanded glyph system, which would have given elemental powers to the Soul Reaver. We had originally planned to include shapeshifting, as well as plane shifting, for instance, Hennig revealed to PlayStation blog. Additionally, some of the last few levels of the game had to be removed, resulting in Soul Reaver's famous to-be-continued ending. With a massive $4 million pre-release campaign from Eidos, the highly anticipated sequel to Blood Omen, Soul Reaver was heavily promoted through magazine articles, television ads, and even a tie-in comic. The timing of its release was considered ideal for a horror-oriented game, as it coincided with the premieres of popular films such as The Sixth Sense, The Blair Witch Project, and The Mummy earlier in 1999. And in August of 1999, Soul Reaver was released to rave reviews. Virtually every aspect of the game was praised, from its immersive atmosphere and captivating storytelling, to its seamless cutscenes, mesmerizing soundtrack, and stunning graphics on the PlayStation. Despite facing delays and not having its original creators involved, the sequel surpassed its predecessor in recognition and acclaim. The remarkable success of Soul Reaver paved the way for a highly anticipated sequel, but in a surprising decision, it was decided to develop not just one, but 2 sequels simultaneously. Soul Reaver 2 would continue Raziel's story, while Blood Omen 2 would capitalize on Kain. Soul Reaver 2 was entrusted to the same team that created the first game, with Amy Hennig leading the charge. Meanwhile, Blood Omen 2 was given to a completely different team, granting them full creative freedom in the process. And this decision proved to be a hindrance for the Soul Reaver 2 team. The development for Soul Reaver 2 began in late 1999 for the PlayStation and Dreamcast, with a deadline of 2 years to complete the game. The team's proof of concept demo for E3 2000 was so impressive that it earned them the opportunity to make Soul Reaver 2 a PlayStation 2 exclusive. The team's main focus was to make Soul Reaver 2 more akin to a movie or a novel, with an emphasis on providing more cinematics compared to the first game. They aimed to expand upon the original Soul Reaver by revamping the combat system, creating larger and more ornate environments, and incorporating more unique puzzles, all while retaining the core elements that define the legacy of Kain games, such as the gripping story, rich characters, cinematic sequences, and immersive voice acting. Despite the improved graphical capabilities of the PlayStation 2 hardware, the development team underestimated the sheer amount of work required to complete Soul Reaver 2, within the tight deadline of only 17 months. With only a team of 4 programmers, they had to start from scratch in developing the game's engine, specifically for the PS2. This meant incorporating the innovative technical features that were the hallmark of the Soul Reaver engine, such as the continuous data streaming and terrain morphing technologies. The level design was also a challenge, as it took the team 3 to 5 times longer to create, texture, and light each level on the PS2, due to each level having roughly 10 times more polygonal detail than in Soul Reaver 1. As a result, Soul Reaver 2 had to sacrifice certain mechanics and content, including 3 elemental forges, additional Reaver enhancements, and multiple levels. The team had to make difficult choices to ensure that the game was completed on time, despite the unexpected challenges they faced. But the biggest obstacle that the Soul Reaver 2 team would face stemmed from the simultaneous development of Blood Omen 2, with Eidos's and Crystal Dynamics executives' limited understanding of the core themes of the Legacy of Kain games. The higher-ups wanted more overly sexual elements and a simpler story, which had a significant impact on Blood Omen 2. The marketing team aimed to create an easy marketable design, which clashed with the more profound thought-provoking themes central to Soul Reaver, Daniel Kabuko revealed on Decab Design. The new team behind Blood Omen 2 sought to capitalize on Kain as a character, creating a contrasting version of Soul Reaver 2 that focused on hack-and-slash combat with a younger, more violent Kain. But the issues faced by Amy Hennig and the Soul Reaver 2 team went beyond creative differences between the two games. The Blood Omen 2 team's lack of communication and understanding of the story created a continuity nightmare for the Soul Reaver 2 team, with inconsistencies in the former game's story, such as featuring a deceased character in the beginning of their game. The Soul Reaver 2 team was left to resolve these contradictions, leading to difficulties in reconciling their own storyline. Despite these challenges, Amy Hennig brilliantly tied everything together in the ending of Soul Reaver 2, incorporating Kain's new memories, the Hilden, and other elements to fix the timeline and story issues arising from the Blood Omen 2 team's decisions. In fact, Amy Hennig's solution involved studying multiple sources of time travel fiction, which inspired her to devise a subplot of temporal paradoxes. This subplot established Blood Omen 2's story as the final paradox resulting from Kain's decision to save Raziel at the end of Soul Reaver 2. Daniel Kabuko, recognizing the enormity of the task that Amy Hennig had to tackle, remarked, "Considering the huge amount of challenges she had to resolve, she just did an amazing job." Soul Reaver 2 made its debut 6 months ahead of its counterpart in October of 2001, and was met with generally positive reviews, particularly for its hallmark storytelling, visuals, and high-quality voice acting that the Legacy of Kain series is renowned for. However, the development team's main focus on evolving gameplay elements did not receive the same level of praise, as some reviewers, including Electronic Gaming Monthly, found the gameplay to be mediocre, unappealing, and lacking replay value. On the other hand, Blood Omen 2 was released 5 months later in March 2002, and received average reviews as it was primarily designed as a hack-and-slash game featuring Kain. Less demanding players will be more tolerant of the game's repetitive nature, while others will yearn for something juicier to sink their teeth into, as Allgame explained in their review. Still performing decently in sales, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos agreed on creating another Legacy of Kain game, but the team would only have 1 year to get it done. Amy Hennig was back in control of the series with Defiance. Early on, it was decided that Defiance would undergo a revamp. The team recognized that the action and adventure elements had become imbalanced with the story aspects, and they were determined to fix it. They believed that taking a more visceral combat route was the answer, with both Kain and Raziel as playable characters. So with Defiance, we set out to overhaul the game's combat system, and to fully exploit our heroes' dark vampiric natures. To that end, we integrated their feeding mechanics into combat in a much more visceral way, gave Raziel's plane shifting mechanics a more sinister aspect, and outfitted both characters with superhuman telekinetic powers, explained Hennig to IGN. The combat was shifted from tactical ability to a more exaggerated over-the-top heroic feel, with a new seamless targeting system. Kain and Raziel could now lift and throw enemies, pull them towards themselves, or juggle them with a mix of telekinetic powers, and finish off enemies with new vampiric finishing moves. While combat was the team's main focus, the story still remained a crucial element, though it would be designed differently in Defiance. This isn't to say that we've dumbed down the story, or adventure elements in any way. We just felt we needed to enrich the action and combat mechanics to appeal to a wider audience, and make the game more fun overall, clarified Hennig to IGN. The spine of the game is still its story, but with Defiance we've set out to make the plot more accessible, less convoluted and wordy, and more dramatic. Less tell and more show. In other words, less like a stage play and more like a movie. To complement this new direction in combat, the team's main goal was to fix the camera to achieve the desired movie-like effect they were aiming for. We wanted the camera in Defiance to support the epic feel of the game, so we developed a scripted cinematic in-game camera system, which captures the action from the best possible angle and distance as the player moves through the environments. The game overall has a much more seamless movie-like feel, rejoiced Hennig to IGN. The story and the desired cinematic feel for Defiance encountered a significant obstacle when the series director and master writer Amy Hennig departed from the development team to join Naughty Dog and work on their franchise Jak and Daxter, as well as a new IP. Although she left behind her notes and ideas for Kain and Raziel, the final game in the series would inevitably suffer from her absence. Upon its release in November of 2003, Defiance received mixed reviews. While it successfully addressed many lingering questions from the series and was lauded for its impressive graphics, animation, and character design, it was hampered by issues such as a flawed collision system, awkward camera mechanics, a lack of challenging puzzles, and repetitive gameplay. Additionally, with 3 consecutive launches in 3 years, players were beginning to feel fatigued or confused with the complex story, which had been unfolding over multiple releases. While Kain and Raziel's story concluded on a good note, it wasn't fully resolved and it looked like it was never going to get the chance, as Eidos put the franchise on hold after Defiance failed to meet their sales expectations. Fans didn't have to wait long and were thrilled of the news of a potential 6th game in development in 2004 by Ritual Entertainment, with support from Crystal Dynamics, as the latter went on to create the new Tomb Raider games. The game was set to feature Kain as the main character, delving deeper into the dark and mysterious universe of Nosgoth. Unlike previous games that had included Raziel as a playable character, this installment would solely focus on Kain, as it was reported that Raziel's story ended in Defiance. Titled Dark Prophecy, the game was envisioned to have multiple playable characters, but all of them would have been different versions of Kain. Players would have the chance to control Kain in his post-Blood Omen 2 form, as he ventured into the demon realm to confront the formidable Hilden Lord and Janos Audron. It was speculated that the Elder Kain would potentially assist his younger self in the material plane, creating a unique and dynamic storyline. Despite the lack of a written script during the development phase, fans were eagerly anticipating the return to the dark and immersive world of Nosgoth, and the possibility of once again controlling the iconic vampire anti-hero Kain. But for unknown reasons, Eidos canceled the project, and took Ritual Entertainment off all projects, and development suddenly ceased, leaving the Legacy of Kain series in limbo once again. In 2010, the Legacy of Kain fanbase held on to their last hope when rumors of a new game surfaced following Square Enix's acquisition of Eidos in 2009. The game was in development for 3 years before Square Enix abruptly canceled the project. Leaks that surfaced after the cancellation revealed an intriguing concept for the game, set in a distant future Nosgoth, where a new race of blue-skinned vampires called the Saradin existed. Players would have assumed a role of a vampire named Gain, who kills a human named Asher and unwittingly binds Asher's soul to his own body. The story would have revolved around Asher's quest for revenge, using his newfound vampire abilities, but with the signature Legacy of Kain flair, turned into an epic tale of the fate of the world. The game was titled Dead Sun. It would have been an action-adventure game with influences from Soul Reaver and Zelda, with combat inspired by the Batman Arkham series, set in an open world that incorporated puzzles and dungeons. One of Square Enix's notable requirements for the game was to have both a single-player and multiplayer mode. Climax Games worked on the single-player portion, while Psionic developed the multiplayer mode. Despite a significant amount of work being completed on Dead Sun, including some motion capture and voice acting, Square Enix canceled the project in 2012, without any marketing efforts, believing that it would not meet their sales expectations. Interestingly, Square Enix did not inform the development team about the cancellation, and they continued to work on the game on weekends, unaware of the decision. This turn of events left the Legacy of Kain's fanbase clinging to a glimmer of hope with Nosgoth, the non-traditional multiplayer game that managed to avoid cancellation. Square Enix allocated additional resources to Nosgoth, which allowed for a unique gameplay experience where players could choose to play as either vampires, utilizing hack-and-slash combat, or humans with a stylized third-person shooter approach. The game entered open beta in January 2015, 3 years after the cancellation of Dead Sun. But despite Square Enix efforts, Nosgoth failed to capture the intended audience and was ultimately shut down after just 1 year of operation. The Legacy of Kain series was conceived by a small visionary team who sought to redefine the boundaries of gaming through thought-provoking themes, immersive writing, and groundbreaking voice acting. With Soul Reaver, the series reached new heights, surpassing its predecessor in its storytelling and narration. But the series took a downward turn due to corporate interference and constant restraints on time, which prevented the full realization of its narrative in a manner befitting to the Legacy of Kain name. Over time, the landscapes of modern gaming shifted, associating dark fantasy with explicit content such as sex, gore, and profanity, a far cry from the dark Gothic atmosphere that the Legacy of Kain series was renowned for. As a result, the chances of seeing Kain or Raziel in new games seemed increasingly unlikely, with the original essence of the series fading away. Despite the challenges faced by the franchise, the allure of Legacy of Kain remains, a testament to the power of storytelling in the gaming world. From its mesmerizing beginnings to its tumultuous journey, the saga of Legacy of Kain continues to captivate gamers, leaving an indelible mark as a timeless masterpiece in the realm of gaming storytelling. If you enjoyed this Rise and Fall video, check out the next one here.